Good morning, good day, good afternoon, and good evening. In the previous three lessons, we discussed what a business report is, what purpose it serves, and for whom they are compiled. We also spoke about the format of the business report, as well as what informs the content of the business plan, or business report rather. Then we did our first practical example, and we did an analysis of the macro environment. And we know that the tool we generally use to analyze the macro environment is the pestle analysis. Now in today's lesson, we take the next step and do a practical example of how to analyze the market environment. The SWOT analysis is a very versatile tool, and it could be used to analyze the market environment or any environment for that matter. However, we know from experience that the Porter's Six Forces model is a more useful tool to identify specific opportunities and threats in the market environment. If we look at the Porter's analysis, we also realize that it's just a specialized opportunities and threats analysis for the market environment. So in a sense, we are doing a SWOT analysis. We don't look at strengths and weaknesses because market forces are beyond our control, and the strengths and weaknesses speak to things that are internal and are within the control of the business. Anyways, moving on to today's example, we've decided to go with the same factual matrix as the one from the previous lesson. We've just changed the question so it requires a market analysis instead of a macro environment analysis. Here is our sample question for today's lesson. You will see that it's the same factual matrix as the previous question. We've just changed the question so it requires a market analysis instead of a macro environment analysis. I won't read the question for you again. It'll waste time. However, you can just pause and read all 3 pages of the question before we move on. Obviously, we will do the basic formalities. We'll write who it's to, who it's from. We'll give it a topic. We'll put the date there. And then we begin with our introduction. Now, as we were looking at your previous essays, I noticed that quite a few of you guys are writing a heading called introduction. Please don't do that. There's no introduction heading. You will use whichever headings you use to introduce the whole topic, and that forms your introduction. So in our introduction, we outline the key points and content areas that we are going to address without expressly saying this report will ... and without restating the question, as we often do in English. So first up, we do the same thing we did with the macro environment analysis. We must define this market environment that we are analyzing, and we've done so here. And then secondly, what tool are we going to use to analyze this environment? And the tool we'll be using is the Porter's Six Forces model. So you explain what it is and why you're using it, and we've done so here. For those of you who are slow readers, you can obviously press pause so you can take some time to read these factors. However, it speaks to competitors, the businesses that sell the same product. It speaks to competitors, businesses who sell a similar product, also known as a substitute product. We look at the possibility of new entrants to the market, competitors as well. We look at the potential problems and threats that come with suppliers. We look at the power of the buyers, and we look at the impact of complementary products. Now, the way that I've laid it out here may be different to the wording that you guys are familiar with, and that's just a stylistic choice that I used. You don't have to go competitors, suppliers. You could have just written it the way you understand it, which is level of existing rivalry, the threat of substitute products, the threat of new entrants to the market, the power of suppliers, the power of buyers, and the impact of complementary products. Styles will vary, but the content should generally be the same. If you guys remember properly, we had a similar looking table for the pestle analysis. And this just gives us a framework that allows us to have a global view of our Porter's analysis. So if you have a look here, we just write down all the forces, all 6 of them in a row. And then next we put the threats, challenges, and opportunities that arise from that force. You must obviously link that force to the business. So what potential impact or actual impact does it have on the business? And of course, you must recommend a strategy to either minimize the impact of a threat or to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented by either one of the forces that you find there. Now this of course is just a suggested tool. Once you are comfortable and experienced, you'll probably do this in your head, or you may do it on a piece of paper without necessarily wasting time creating a whole table. But this allows you to make sure that you've covered your bases. It's an amazing planning tool that I personally still use and I recommend, especially to beginners. So in our introduction, we've explained what we are doing, what the purpose of the report is, and that's to do a macro analysis and market analysis. And we've explained which tool we'll be using and why we use that tool. And now the next step is to actually use the tool to actually do the job we've been asked to do, and that is to conduct the market analysis. The first force we look at is the level of existing rivalry, also known as the current competitors. Now it's important for any business to know what competitors are doing. If one can find a sector where a competitor is not performing well, it may present an opportunity for the business to make more profit. By identifying the areas where competitors are achieving success, it may be an indicator of a threat to the business, requiring the implementation of a tactic or a strategy to avoid losses. An example would be if a competitor has got a superior marketing strategy, like Coke, it poses a threat to one's business because customers may be lost to the competitor because of their strong marketing strategy. When the business is compared to its competitors, the following factors require reviewing. I've put these factors on the slide so you can go and almost learn them off by heart. So at least you've got an arsenal of factors to look at and you know where to start at least. It's not an exhaustive list and there could be unlimited number of other factors you can look at. But these are just to give you a start. It's a starter kit for a beginner. And you guys can read the slides for yourselves, but essentially it's the size and the market resources of the business. The bigger and more well-resourced your competitor is, the more of a threat they are because they can respond to any innovation you put in place. They can also underprice, keep prices low, either at cost level or even below cost level, which means that you are then forced to drop your prices to compete with them. If they've got excess cash reserves, they can operate at a loss for months or even years. And if you don't have the cash reserves, you can operate at a loss for a few weeks or months, and then you have to shut down. And once you shut down, they can then raise their prices again because they've gotten rid of the competitor using their size and financial resources. Market share. What percentage of the market share does your competitor have? The larger the market share they have, the more the threat they are to you. It's a small market share. It tells you that they're not dominant and they haven't established a strong and loyal customer base. The quality of the product and service. Obviously, the better the quality that your competitor is offering, the harder it will be to compete with them and steal customers away, because essentially there are very few reasons to leave someone who's giving you a quality product and or service. Consumer brand loyalty. How loyal are the consumers to that brand? You can ask Pepsi how difficult it is to try and get loyal Coke drinkers to shift to a new brand. Likewise, Mercedes-Benz consumers may not want to shift away from Mercedes to Audi or BMW, depending on their brand loyalty. the pricing of products or services. This is particularly important in markets such as the fast-moving consumer goods, your retail items that we buy on a monthly or weekly basis. Generally speaking, if the price is already low because the existing customers have got economies of scale where, because they make thousands or millions of items per month or per annum, their costs are at a really, really low amount, and that allows them to price their items at a very cheap rate. So you need to assess if you are able to realistically compete with that price based on your size and experience, and be honest about this. The convenience of location and distribution channels, that's also vital. Are you able to compete with the convenience of the location of your competitors? And are you able to access distribution channels that are as advanced or as sophisticated as theirs? If you can improve upon it, then it's an opportunity. If it's very superior and very strong, then it's a threat, and you may need to find alternative strategies to adapt to that. And then, of course, trading hours. If your customers are open for longer than you are, if your competitors open for longer than you are, then it's possible that you need to consider also extending your trading hours, while at the same time not compromising your relationship with your employees. Now, if we apply some of these factors to our current factual matrix, the size and financial resources of the business. Now, Lyft has proven itself to be a significant player in the American market, and we know this because of the graph we were shown in the question paper. So Lyft has got some financial resources and size. Although we don't know what the extent is, we know that they are probably able to take on some losses initially as they give out discounts and coupons and lowered pricing in order to try and penetrate the market. However, their competitors also have significant size and financial resources. So it's a bit dangerous, a bit risky to try and compete in a market where your competitors are able to lower their prices as well. In terms of market share, obviously Uber dominates the market, which makes them more of a threat, and it gives you a more compelling reason to find strategies to overcome that. The quality of products or services, it is my opinion that the quality of Uber's service as well as Taxify is quite spot on. They're generally clean, they're well maintained, they're safe, polite. Consumer brand loyalty. A lot of people we know say that they won't choose anything besides Uber. They won't try Taxify. They're quite happy with Uber and they trust it. Pricing of products and services. We know from general knowledge that Uber hasn't turned a profit in years, and this is because their pricing is just simply too low as they try and establish a market for themselves. So this means that any new entrant needs to be aware that they will need to price their trips at a value amount that is below the amount required to make a profit. So Lyft needs to evaluate its own financial resources and see if they can afford to operate at a loss while they compete with Uber for a period of time that we cannot be sure of. Convenience of location and distribution channels. I don't think this is of concern since the taxis stop and stand wherever they're allowed to. Trading hours, we can assume that Lyft would have to then operate for 24 hours since their competitors already operate 24 hours a day in South Africa. So the factor that stood out the most for me here is the pricing of products and services. Lyft will need to make sure that they're able to price at a price that is so low that they're willing to make losses in the short and middle term in order to compete with Uber. And to me, this makes this market not a terribly attractive one, because you have to start off making losses already, and that's not something that's terribly attractive to most entrepreneurs. But that's just my conclusion. You guys can make your own sub-conclusion. Remember, we spoke about sub-conclusions in our previous lessons, and I said that as you deal with each factor, or as you deal with each force you must draw a sub-conclusion. And therefore, when you give your final conclusion at the end, there can be no and should be no surprises. We should know already what conclusion you are pushing us towards because of the sub-conclusions you keep drawing under each of the subheadings. Now, once we've identified the threats, we then need to develop strategies to improve and therefore outperform our competitors. Once we've mentioned these factors, as competitors have the power to lure away customers and therefore profits. Excuse me. Now, once again, there's an endless list of strategies you can employ, and this is where your creative problem solving comes in. But 2 examples that we've identified here is putting together a customer loyalty program to make sure that the business is more attractive than other competitors. If your competitors already have customer loyalty programs, well, you may actually be compelled to then introduce one yourself so that you can be able to compete. You may also want to reduce the price of certain products to make sure the business is a more attractive option than its competitors. Of course, with the transport industry, it's a very price sensitive industry. So if someone does offer a cheaper product, the ability to shift customers away is very likely. Not only do we deal with the threat from existing competitors, but there may be a challenge from a new business that sees an opportunity to make money by entering our market. The business may therefore try to build barriers in order to prevent new businesses from entering the market successfully. So you need to look at the barriers to entry of the market you're either playing in or hoping to enter. Now, what barriers might there be to the threat of new entrants? And I've given some examples here. For example, the bigger retailers and shopping malls will, for example, negotiate with the center management to prevent too many competitors from acquiring space in the same center. So maybe Pick n Pay gets a sole license that they'll be the only big retailer that's allowed, big supermarket that's allowed to operate at that mall. That's one barrier to entry. A business may also have a patent that prevents any other business from selling a similar product. The startup costs may be large, whether to advertise, have promotions, or sell items at lower prices, including prices that are lower than cost. And all of this may make it difficult for a new business to enter the market. This is certainly the case in the ride-hailing market, where we know that companies have to spend millions before they make any profits. And this makes it difficult for any new business to enter the market. Now, this makes it a more attractive market to enter, because you don't want to enter a market where any other person can come in at any time. The ride-hailing market requires large startup capital, and that is a good thing once you are in, because you know that the threat of new entrants remains relatively low. Sometimes government puts in barriers to entry and may have legislation that prevents other people from supplying a similar service or product. Eskom is an example of that. They have the sole right to the electricity grid in South Africa, and so no one else can just simply come in and provide electricity because of government regulation. There's also import taxes that prevent or deter certain industries from importing stuff that is locally manufactured in South Africa. So even though an item might be cheap in a country, but you find that the import taxes end up making it not worth importing. An example is vehicles. The import tax on vehicles in South Africa is quite high. The next force is the availability of substitute products. Guys, we must remember that a substitute product does not refer to a different brand. Different brands fall under existing rivalry. We are looking at substitute products which are different products that satisfy the same need. And the example I've given here is pizzas versus burgers. So we're not looking at Debonairs versus scooters or McDonald's versus Steers. We're looking at different types of goods that satisfy the same need. So both pizzas and burgers, although they're different, they satisfy a hunger and a craving for fast food or junk food, or however you express it. And likewise, you may choose to have pasta or a takeaway sandwich from Checkers. The increasing availability of substitute products generates more indirect competitors. So though these won't be direct rivals, they are still competitors because customers may choose to consume those products instead of your product. And you need to also consider outperforming these competitors who are substitute products. In our practical example here, substitute products would be just using your own vehicle. We know that it's not always practical to use your own vehicle in South Africa because there's so much traffic. Not all of us can afford our own vehicles. Some of us may be in the country or the city for a few weeks or a few months, so it doesn't make sense to buy our own vehicles. Another substitute product would be to hire a car from Avis or whoever. Once again, that may be too expensive for a lot of people, or you may not need the car all day. You may just need to get to work and get home. So it's pointless to hire a car for the entire day when you don't need it for the entire day. Then there's of course public transport, which includes taxis and the Gautrain station. We know the Gautrain station is very limited and only goes to certain areas, including the airport in Sandton. However, if you need to get to places where there is no Gautrain, then it becomes a problem, and you end up needing to use the very product that you're trying to substitute away, which is an Uber. We all know about the unreliability of taxis, the congestion, and also how limited they are in terms of getting you to exactly where you need to be and on time. So luckily in our case, I would say that the availability of substitute products to people who are looking at using an Uber or a Lyft is very limited, and generally speaking, the substitute products will not be able to steal Uber or Lyft competitors away and take them to taxis. The next force on the list is the power of suppliers. Any business that does not have a reliable supplier is certain to encounter problems, more often than not. In order to be successful, the business depends on the supplier to provide a good quality product when needed, so at the right time, and to deliver the correct quantity to the correct place needed at a reasonable price. So you can imagine a fast food retailer that sells a product to a large athletics meeting in the middle of summer, and the supplier is not able to deliver additional water and cool drinks. In that case, the supplier has a very big impact on your reliability and the impression that your customers have on you. If you are supplying us with drinks at a large athletics meeting, you can't even deliver water, then as customers, quite frankly, will think that you are useless and unreliable. And that's all because of the unreliability of your supplier. So large suppliers, for example, ABI, the suppliers of Coke, Fanta, Sprite, and so forth, supply their products to a large number of wholesalers and fast food businesses and retailers. So it's important that the business keeps in mind that if the supplier sells to a competitor at a lower price and provides the stock to a competitor when there's limited stock. So for example, if there's a strike and Coke has got its favorite customers, you're not one of them, it means that you're in a weaker competitive position, and consequently you have less chances of succeeding. So because of this, it's critical that the business develops and maintains good relationships with its suppliers, and hopefully that should there be a shortage of Coke, you're on that list of preferred and important customers that Coke will deliver to. Now on this slide, we can see the possible costs that are associated with the unavailability of stock. If there's no material, it means that a manufacturer cannot produce. Obviously, if you can't produce, you can't sell, you can't make any profit. If there's no material, it also means that the machines and labor cannot be utilized to their full capacity. Once again, the production process comes to a halt. You can't make sales, you can't make profit. Then there are other administrative and opportunity costs that are incurred when dealing with a stock out. That means when you're out of stock. So if a business has to run out of stock, it becomes very difficult to negotiate discounts when placing orders. And of course, you lose customer goodwill if they have to come to you, find no stock, and then go to competitors. And for this reason, it's important to build strong and long-term relationships with your suppliers, as the success of the business to a large extent is determined by the suppliers of the product. Now, when we look at the power of suppliers, it would be a mistake to not consider the bargaining power of suppliers. Now, the bargaining power of suppliers depends on lots of factors. For example, are they your only supplier? And if they are your only supplier, that means they've got lots of power over you, because you can't say to them, well, I don't like your price, or I don't like your terms and conditions, I'm going to someone else. Well, if there's no one else, then you're in trouble. So that's one factor that affects the bargaining power of suppliers. The other factor is how many customers do they have? If you are their biggest customer, then they know that the threat of losing you is too high and they're willing to accommodate more of your demands and requests. So then that allows you to then negotiate better repayment terms. Maybe the supplier, then you can say, no, give me 3 months to pay you back because my customers only pay me within 2 months. And that gives you some breathing space. You can negotiate delivery times. Once again, depending on who's got the bargaining power, you may be firmer and say, no, I need this delivered at a certain time, or I need it to deliver to my clients. And of course, you can negotiate pricing and discounts and so forth. You should also have looked at the different factors that affect bargaining power of suppliers in your textbook. So go and have a look at that once again when you get a chance. Luckily for Lyft, their business model doesn't require them to buy lots of inputs and so forth, because the drivers come with their own vehicles and so forth. So there's not too much stuff to negotiate, and they provide their own software system. So once again, there's no supplier of the software. So this shouldn't be too big a factor for Lyft. The next factor, of course, is the power of buyers. Now, the buyer may be a wholesaler ordering from a manufacturer, or it may be a retailer buying products for his shop, or even the final consumer who spends his or her money on your business. Now, if you don't respect the buyers, you don't offer them good value for money, they may decide to support a different business. And when you sell to your final consumer, you need to consider the following aspects. What type of product are you offering? A consumer, for example, may be prepared to travel a greater distance to buy specialty products such as cars, jewelry, expensive household appliances in order to get exactly what she wants. However, convenience goods such as groceries and select goods such as clothes do not justify traveling longer distances, and the consumer may be happy to settle for a different brand or a substitute product. We need to look at, is the customer brand loyal, or is the customer prepared to swap brands if he or she feels she can get a better deal? So for example, 2 pizzas for the price of 1. Chances are I'll go for the 2 pizzas for the price of 1. Price sensitivity. In some instances, buyers may be happy to pay more for a product or service if it's delivered or has a guarantee or is conveniently available. So lots of things affect price sensitivity. And of course, is there any snob value or image associated with the product or service? An example of this would be a luxury pizza versus a traditional pizza, or gourmet burgers versus normal run-of-the-mill cheap burgers. In our practical example, my opinion would be that the buyers don't really have too much power over the likes of Uber and Taxify, because they don't really have other alternatives to go to. If they say, stuff it, we're not going to use Uber and Taxify and Lyft and Bolt, well, then where will they go? So I think, relatively speaking, the industry is quite safe. However, the consumer is price sensitive. So if Lyft's price is not low enough, they may find themselves losing customers to their competitors. In this type of service, there's also nothing that locks a customer in. So for example, if you go to a particular school and you're a customer at that school, you don't like that school, it's not that easy to say tomorrow, okay, actually, I don't like the school today, I'm going to that school, or no, the school sucks, I'm moving to that one. Whereas if you look at goods like ride-hailing services, if I don't like the Taxify today, I can simply go and say, okay, this afternoon I'm going to go use Uber. I'm never going back to Taxify. So all those factors need to be kept in mind. The final factor we look at is the power of complementary products. Now we know that complementary products involves one product where its use is interrelated with the use of another product. So generally speaking, these products are paired together or consumed together. An example obviously is coffee and sugar, fish and chips, burgers and milkshakes. I don't know how many of you eat burgers and milkshakes. And probably one of the more significant ones is fast foods and Mr. Delivery. Now imagine if you sell fast foods, but you're not able to deliver the food to your customers and you rely on Mr. Delivery to deliver to customers. What happens to the sale of fast foods as a whole industry if Mr. Delivery decides to increase their delivery charges substantially? Or what is the impact on Mr. Delivery if a few new fast food businesses open in a specific area and none of them have the capacity to deliver their own products? So obviously in the first instance, if Mr. Delivery increases their prices, then fewer people will opt for takeouts and may just choose to make their own food because it's now becoming too expensive to take takeouts. But at the same time, if new businesses open and they can't do their own deliveries, well, this is great for Mr. Delivery because it means that they get more business. So you can see all this interrelatedness that is involved. Are there any complementary products that we can think of that are used in conjunction with ride-hailing services like Uber? I'm guessing would be smartphones. You can't really use an Uber or a Lyft without smartphones. So are smartphones getting better? Are more and more people getting smartphones? And to me, the answer is yes. The smartphone industry is growing, which means more and more people will be able to consume Lyft's product, and therefore the power of complementary products would say that it weighs in our favor. Now, as we've been analyzing the different forces, we've looked at the force, we've looked at its impact on the business, and hopefully you guys have been drawing sub-conclusions. And now we come here and we summarize those sub-conclusions into one, and we take the most important sub-conclusions, the ones that sway the decision, because you have to make a recommendation, and it must be based on those conclusions sub-conclusions that you think were the most compelling, most urgent, most influential, yes. So I mean, your conclusion could say anything depending on the sub-conclusions you wrote down. And I didn't want to really give you too many sub-conclusions because I didn't want to limit your creative process. Otherwise, you guys will end up just thinking about the conclusions I did and then try and replicate those. But my conclusion essentially would read something to the effect of, it is the conclusion of this report that the South African ride-hailing market environment is one that has a strong existing level of rivalry with established and trusted brands that deliver a quality product that is loved and has established brand loyalty. Depending on how much cash reserves Lyft has, they may be able to successfully penetrate the market using a strategy of lower pricing methods initially to attract new customers away from existing suppliers such as Uber and Taxify. The challenges are substantial, however, and they may be overcome using discounts as long as Lyft will be able to operate at a lower profit margin or even at a loss for some time before they establish a strong enough customer base and then raise their prices to become more profitable. However, as has been the case with Uber, this may take a very long time, and therefore this strategy will depend largely on the cash reserves that Lyft has. Once again, this is just my example of a conclusion, and yours will depend on so many different factors. Once again, it is your turn to now do a practice question. You'll see that we've given you the same factual matrix as the one we gave you for the previous practice question for the macro environment analysis. Please Remember your planning. Remember to go back and refresh your knowledge and memory using the previous lessons if you need to. Remember to use the correct format. Remember to use headings and subheadings. Good luck. I wish you well.